Pitchfork, the music site, which we tend to use sometimes for news here or there, but I always like to see their ratings just for how shit they are. Um, they're doing they rescored 19 album reviews, ranging from PJ Harvey to Daft Punk, rescoring a bunch of records, either downgrading them or upgrading them from their scores from the previous stuff. And I have a list of issues to go along with this, because the whole reason why we do an arbitrary scale is so that way our review is our review. We say what it is. Every once in a while, an album will grow on us and we'll talk about it here or there, but what we reviewed was what we reviewed at the time. It's what we felt at the time, so on and so forth, naturally, right? Obviously, some albums can grow on you later as you get it conceptually and stuff, but that's why we don't like doing scores, because it's not fair for an album to give it a score when it can evolve to something greater, or unevolve into something terrible as well later on, which is very rare but does happen.
Yeah, I want to add to that before you jump into the list, Sean, is that
Yeah,
I think we try to do things to the extent that we can as fairly as possible. We review
exactly.
albums on the same scale. We review like three in a row generally, so we can give each album enough time to really sink in. When we review more in a given week, at least the way we have set up Audioface right now, it starts to blend together and we can't give albums a fair enough score, and then it all starts to skew how we've reviewed albums 200 episodes on in. So that keeps it fair. The way we do the singles rule, way we try to keep that up, keeps things as fair as possible. There's a number of different things down the way, like through the way we produce Audioface, that tries to get us to some like semblance of fairness. But at the end of the day, all these opinions are subjective. We want to try to express that. We think that you know, to the margins, sometimes you can say, no, that's objectively bad mixing, or that's objectively bad like
Exactly.
sounding stuff, right? But a lot of that is like in the extremes, in the margins. A lot of this is just subjective, and it's fun to have music discourse and talk about it with people. It's a community thing. And like Sean said, we talk about times where albums grow on us. We talk about times where albums have the space to grow on us if we're just reviewing them. And so I think it's important as a music, not just as a music critic, but like people who are music fans, to be like mature out there in the comment section and allow that space for you to like, albums can grow on you. Albums might actually, oh, you listen to this after a while and it doesn't age quite as well. Or you can separate it between something that has a good space for you versus a good space for versus like being a good album, right? Like there's some albums I like personally, even though I can acknowledge they're not like absolute works of art, right? And that's totally fine.
Yeah. I'll go into some of what they did, right?
Yeah, let's jump in. This is
So
gonna be great.
let's jump. I'm not going to do every single one. I'm just going to do ones like just to give you an understanding, and then I'm going to go on a rant on a couple of them,
Yeah,
extreme
I just
rants.
want to say sorry, last thing, because
Mhm.
the Pitchfork article says, and I quote, "What follows are 19 ideas about rescoring," and I think that's the right tone we need before we jump in.
Yeah, should I read this in Dave Rubin voice like the whole time?
Please don't.
BJ Harvey, Stories from the City, Stories from the Sea, year 2000. It was a 5.4, but now it's 8.4 because it's evolved into a great rock album. Because before her fifth album,
Please stop.
going to her fifth album, I'm gonna cry of laughter.
Okay,
Anyways, but yeah, that's the first one because I like PJ
so
Harvey.
PJ
Also,
Harvey,
Tongue
yes.
I know that's their fifth album. I always liked Stories from the City, Stories from the Sea. They did that from a 5.4 when it was done in the year 2000, and they upgraded it to an 8.4 21 years later. It's like, okay, well, like you can leave it. That doesn't make sense to push, an album up, but whatever. That's what happens. Um,
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion about that album
I mean, I like that. I
necessarily,
always
but
liked that.
like,
I
yeah,
always liked it. So there's nothing like too crazy with it. I mean, you
so,
have
so, so,
Tom on it and stuff, but
in the way of like they upgraded the score there, like what was it about generally that like, is this sort of an instance of like, okay, hey, we just didn't know the sauce that we had while we came on, but like it grew on us a lot more.
more or less, yeah. It's more of because it's the whole year 2000. Like it's the shift from grunge into alt rock. It's the shift from alt rock to more experimental stuff. So it's that whole thing of you're still stuck in that cube and you're trying to get out of that cube, but you don't understand the concepts and stuff of the record at the time. Because PJ Harvey really made like a solid alt rock album with it, and it wasn't. They didn't receive it well, but I mean music journalism. You have like um one like these are the ones that I like really bug me, other than the Daft Punk ones, because we'll get to those in a second. Like Grimes, Miss and Anthropocene, which I can never say that.
Misanthropocene.
Yeah, I can never say that record
I want
right.
to say that's a
Which came
silent
out
C.
last year, right? They already downgrade one from a year ago from an 8.2 to a 6.9. Like, how do you go just a year and then go back on your review and be like, oh, hey, I messed up or something? Like, your review is your review at that time, especially only a year apart. Like, doesn't make sense.
Yeah, we are very
It
vocal
pisses me
critics.
off.
We're very vocal critics of Grimes here on Audioface, for a lot of reasons that don't have to do with the music. But music,
Yes,
she's been like fairly consistent,
she's been fine.
as opposed to Kanye West, who like his music deteriorated through the Kardashian relationship.
Yes,
I'm saying causation, not necessarily correlation here, but that was
yes.
just like a thing I noticed. Grimes has been fairly consistent. I would like, yeah, I wouldn't say it's one of those other cases here, like we said in the beginning, where it's a lot of times I give an album a good review, and that may be the last time I listen to that album for several years or maybe a year or so. And yeah, maybe I gave like the Grimes album a decent review when we did it, but like it's not necessarily like a thing that I would be listening or repeating necessarily that often, but also that sort of comes down to my own personal preferences. I think my review of the record, just as many of the other things we list on Audioface that fall outside of my own personal preferences, is fair and
It's
still
your
stands
review.
for what it is. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why we have the arbitrary scale. Now we're going to get to the two ones that piss me off. Okay, we're going to get to the recently retired, which makes me extreme sad boy, Daft Punk. You have Discovery, which is one of my all-time favorite albums of ever, ever. It's also the first album I ever purchased with my own coin. They originally, the first guy who reviewed it around Pitchfork put it as a 6.4. You should be hung and quartered for giving it a 6.4 in the year in 2001. And then they bumped it up to a 10, which makes sense. But again, you gave it a 6.4. Just leave it as a 6.4, man. Just you messed up, own it. And it's the best part is the guy who reviewed it says, this is the review often quoted at me by any person who's ever cornered me at a party for a diatribe about the futility of music criticism. You're so like self-centered in your own ego that you can't just say I fucked up. There you go. But whatever. And then the one that makes me like absurdly angry is Daft Punk's Random Access Memories, which was our I know album of the decade of the 2010s. They downgraded it from 8.8 to a 6.8 because they feel like people aren't listening to it anymore. The whole thing is Ram has some jams, but it doesn't feel pivotal in the same way Discovery did. The fact that it opened up, disco to a bunch of people, right? You have all these different concepts throughout the album that have influenced music since. Like you have a lot of funk stuff that have now really opened the door for funk is back, which is Dan's favorite term. A lot of that happened because of Random Access Memories as well, because people didn't really know about it much, or if you grew up like even Gen Zs, if they heard that, if they didn't weren't exposed to it at a younger age, that was kind of their first big opening door into the realm of disco, of funk, of all these other throwback things. And like they're still bumped to this day, so I don't know what they're talking about, because they said that um they gave it that review at 8.8 because they felt like 10 years later people would still be listening to it, which they are. I don't
Yeah.
understand what they're doing.
Like us music critics, like God no. Like Get Lucky and Lose Yourself to Dance, while they had like far more radio play than even like us Daft Punk fans would argue like they deserved, because like they're still being played like kids parties, like everything, like
Yeah, they still
years and
are.
years after, at like again like a decade out. Yes, almost. But I still stand by our thing of like Random Access Memories being a really, like you put it, Sean, like
It's
it's one of the
incredible.
few universal albums where you can put it on for about anyone and
Exactly.
everyone will love at least something on it. And
Yep.
so that is like that. I think a lot of when it gets to the futility of scores here is because you're put, the ultimate arbitrary scale is these grades, these numbers, because I'm not really sure if This is just like them revisiting these reviews and going, huh, do I feel the same way? Yes or no? Which is something you should kind of, as a reviewer, think about, huh, I might listen to this in a couple years in the future and go, I could see this a different way. Or I think as a seasoned music critic, you've listened to enough albums to go, when does it kind of head in those directions? And we've said that before. I think Sean's been pretty clear with that with 21 Savage and like It's the Album, for example. Um,
And I've said that with recent reviews. Even last week I was saying that a couple of the albums that we listened to is like it might take time for me to really grasp it conceptually because I didn't only got two listen throughs. If I have another three, four listen throughs of a record, I might enjoy it more or I might enjoy it less depending what it is. That's the whole point of doing a review is you're open and honest with it instead of trying to fit it into a box of a specific number to then rate it against other albums, but you can't do that because every album is different. Not every genre is the same. Not every artist is the same. You can't like you're not trying to letter grade somebody to have a fight among artists. That's not the point. And that's why we have an arbitrary scale. So it just really makes me mad when that happens. And I think a lot of people were saying that too online and whatnot.
yeah, I think we've given all the necessary caveats there. I'll think one my overarching point I think is also some of these things in here, like Chief Keef
Hmm.
to let's see, Chief Keef to what is it? Lana Del Rey. Oh wait, I think the Lana Del yeah, Chief Keef, Lana Del Rey. A couple of these are sort of reviews, or Liz Fair, for example, Charlie XCX. Well, some of these I agree with. For example, like the Liz Fair album was originally given a 0 and now it's given a 6. I think that could be like some of the danger of these like extreme hot takes. Like sometimes it's good to thoroughly torch an album, but like be a little bit more careful with
Like
when you
us
do
on
it
Saint,
because
like us on Saint John, like we'll go to the grave saying that album was absolutely garbage because we still agree that the album is absolutely garbage. But there are things too where they're doing it because of the popularity of the album as well,
yeah, or the
which is
popularity of
something
the
you
person.
can't fucking do. Like you need to be objective on music and not just base it on the popularity. And that's exactly what they did with Ram. They they downgraded it because they see it as not being as popular as it once was. I'm like, well, no shit. That's like album is released, it's going to be especially with the for the time, but it still stands as a great record. You
Yeah,
can't downgrade it because of that. Also, it's still being played, so it's just so stupid, so
and
stupid.
like Chief Keef sort of became just like a meme for like white people essentially. Like obviously he's a
It did.
black artist, but like all the Chief Keef fans I know are like white boys, which like fine, God bless. I love when like rap has these like intersecting like diameters, but ultimately the original score was a 7.9. Now you're moving it to a 9.1. That's a difference of a like barely a point on either like side. So like ultimately it's being put there as like okay, you moved it from being a oh really really good like above average album to being a oh this is an amazing top of the line album. Why like for clout? Same with the Lana Del Rey one from 5.5 to 7.8 Born to Die. Okay, you could say it's maybe like moved up a little bit, but again, like the ultimate arbitrary scale. I'll say this again. The ultimate arbitrary scale are these numbers and letters that they just like warp discourse. They don't set it up for you to be able to talk about music in a proper way.